Alright lads, it is the Meta Goblin here and welcome to another video. Now I know that a lot of you may want to re-roll in Legion and I'm going to help you make that decision. We're going to be talking about which PvP class that you should play in Legion, right? But this isn't a video I'm not going to tell you like, go for this class, it's the most overpowered. Go for this class, it's the most fun. What I'm going to do is fully explain the playstyle of each and every class, okay? What that class brings to the table, why that class is unique and interesting to play compared to the other classes, so you can make, with knowing what every single class is all about, you can make your own decision. So you'll understand what I'm on about as soon as I jump into the video, which is going to happen right now. Let's talk about Warrior. Okay, Warrior, a very high damage class. They have very good maneuverability, a decent amount of utility, and also a little bit of capacity to support their teammates. Their damage is basically a combination of sustained damage, because they do actually have quite a few dots. It's not exactly a rock class, but they do have dots, and also a mixture of basically very rare, huge amounts of burst. So it's a combination of burst and sustained damage. It basically is a mixture of every single class in the game, which is really good, really fun and interesting to play. Next, let's talk about Warlock. Now, their damage is very unique to every single other class, pretty much, apart from what's similar to Shadow Priest and Unholy DK. But basically, their damage is all about sustained rot damage. It does have a little bit of burst, but the burst is kind of low. You do kind of burst, but mostly it is about rotting damage. So it's about keeping your damage up constantly. They have a good amount of utility. They have a good amount of crowd control. Their defensive capacity is a little weak, and they're basically not a support class at all. They cannot offer heals or any kind of defensives for our teammates. So it's all about damage and good CC. Let's quickly talk about Demon Hunter. Obviously I haven't played it, but I've read all the information about it. Basically, Demon Hunter is going to be, I guess, similar to Warrior. It's not much of going to be a support class. It's going to be a very high burst. I can predict it being a burst class. It's not sustained damage, it's not rot damage or anything. It's very high burst damage, and it's going to be very maneuverable, and it's also going to have a lot of range capacity and a lot of utility. I don't know how that stealth ability is going to work in one of the stealth abilities. Be seeing people in stealth ability is going to work out in PvP, but it definitely very maneuverable, very high burst, and it's going to definitely be quite fun, a very fun class to play in PvP. I can definitely predict that. Let's talk about Rogue. Now, Rogue is definitely not the highest DPS in the game. It's not as good as Death Knight. It's probably maybe on par with Warrior. But what makes Rogue so deadly isn't really the damage. By the way, the damage is a mixture of rot damage and burst damage, depending on which spec you play. Basically, the reason why Rogue is so deadly is because of the maneuverability. The maneuverability of a Rogue is mental. You're never going to be able to kite a Rogue. That is the kind of class it is. You're never going to have trouble getting into melee range. You're constantly going to be able to do damage. They also have decent CC. Mostly it is in the form of stuns. They are basically very good at locking down healers, but they're but if they're going on a DPS and they have to CC a healer, it's a little less, but the utility is nonetheless still pretty good. And there's a lot of healing capacity. There's basically a mixture of everything, but it isn't a support class. You cannot provide heals or anything like that. Let's talk about Druid. There's obviously a lot of specs for Druid to cover. First of all, let's cover Feral. Feral, again, it's a bit like Rogue, it's basically the same as Rogue. Well, not the same, but it's very similar. They don't have the highest damage in the game, but they make up with it with extreme maneuverability. You're going to have because in cat form you have such a passive speed increase, you're never going to have trouble getting onto your target. So the damage is good. Again, the damage is a mixture of rot damage and burst damage. Also, you have a lot of good CC. You can perform a lot of good CC chains on a healer, not just your current target. But also, Druid can provide quite a lot of support for your rest of your teammates. I mean, this can basically be in the form of off heals and stuff like that. So it's also basically a support kind of melee bursty kind of class. For Boomkin, it's pretty much the same. Not the highest damage in the game, but it makes up with it obviously with it's basically a little like Warlock. You've got very high sustained damage with a lot of random burst with your procs. And the thing that's great about basically any Druid spec is the hybridization. You're going to be able to avoid people very easily by mixing things up, going into cat form, using dash, all this kind of thing. You probably have the highest CC, one of the highest CC chains in the game, so an extremely high amount of utility, and also it is a great support class, providing off heals, and it's all around basically a mixture of absolutely everything like Druid should be. It should have, you know, it's a synergized class, if that is such a word. The healer spec, first healer spec we're going to talk about. Healing, Druid healer is all about HOTS. Basically, if your target doesn't have your HOTS, it's all about sustained healing. It's like, imagine if it was damage, it's not about burst healing, it's about sustained healing, like keeping healing up over time. If you don't have HOTS on your ally, they're basically going to die. So it's all about keeping HOTS up. It's also very maneuverable, I can't say that word today, you know what I mean, class, and you're gonna because you can switch into cat form and do a lot of, you know, synergy things. You're gonna be able to avoid melee quite easily, and it's definitely very fun to just randomly switch into cat form and dash away and blink away and stuff. It's very basically, I would argue it's probably the funnest healer because it's the most maneuverable healer. Let's talk about Mage. Mage is overall sustained damage is quite low. Mage is all about lining up like the perfect burst. Okay, you can burst. It's probably one of the best burst classes in the game, but it's all about perfect timing. The burst doesn't happen very often. You probably have to wait like every 10-20 seconds to go for kills, but during those 20 seconds you can, you know, it's all about peeling, because the utility of Mage is, you know, again, is probably one of the best in the game. You've got a spammable CC, polymorph, you've got stuns, you've got roots and stuff like that. So yeah, you cannot really there's no support capabilities, but really, so high utility and then high limited burst. So the burst happens very rarely, and you have to like line it up very perfectly. It's a very sophisticated and strategic spec. And FYI, I think basically Fire Mage and Frost Mage are pretty much the same. Arcane Mage, I don't know if it's going to be viable, but Arcane Mage is pretty much the same. Right, let's talk about Death Knight. Death Knight I know the most about. So Frost Death Knight, let's start with Frost Death Knight. Frost Death Knight is probably, well, both DK specs are basically the highest DPSing PvP specs in the game, right? Providing that you play well. You're always going to be able to out-damage a Warlock, which is probably the next in line, or a Warrior, definitely. But, so they have an insane amount of damage, but the thing is, because they have so much damage, they suffer in maneuverability. They have some counter maneuverability, like snares and stuff, but in terms of their own maneuverability, like, they have none, except for Death Grip, right, which is on a quite high cooldown. So this is why I don't really like playing DKs in arena so much, because you're basically going to be kited and snared quite a lot. But if you like being, you know, basically one-shotting people as soon as you get into melee range, then this is definitely the class for you. Unholy is a little bit different. Unholy, the reason why it's my favourite spec in the game is because it combines the elements of a hunter, a warrior and a warlock all into one. That's basically what Unholy Death Knight is. You've got the warlock rot damage, you've got the warrior burst capability very randomly. It's not the highest burst in the game, and you've also got a pet, right? So the reason why Unholy is, again, it doesn't have the best maneuverability in the game, but the reason why Unholy is kind of like more fun to play, a little bit more than Frost, is because it has range capabilities. You can do damage with your dots at range. You don't have to be in melee range all the time, and you can also do damage with your death cards, or your gargoyle, with your pet, and all these things can, you know, they can happen while you're not in melee range, and that's why it's my favourite spec to play in the game. Let's talk about Shaman now. So let's start with Enhancement Shaman. Enhancement Shaman is basically a melee version of a Frost Mage, because you have a decent amount of sustained damage, but really it's all about the perfect burst lineup, the perfect timing of that burst. Shaman probably, like, I've seen the biggest crits ever on an Enhancement Shaman. That's the kind of spec they are. Elemental is, it's a little bit like, I guess it's sustained damage, but it's also, it's really complicated to explain. Elemental is basically a mixture of sustained damage and and burst, because the burst happens very randomly, because it's basically based on a proc. It's based on lava burst. Sometimes you can like get like a massive amount of damage if you're lucky out in one. So it's all about random, very high burst, but also sustained damage. And all the Shaman specs, well, let's talk about the DPS ones first. Obviously, you have quite a lot of utility. You've got a good amount of CC. You've got stuns. You've got peels. You've also got a lot of support capacity. Shamans can off heal and during like clear casting phases, and do quite a lot of healing to their teammates, which is really helpful. The healing spec, I haven't missed any other healing specs, have I? No, I don't think I have. So the healing spec, Shaman is basically all about huge heals. The problem is, like, Shaman get trained a lot, right? Shaman aren't the best at avoiding melee. Shaman can get trained a lot. They need to hard cast a lot, but when they do hard cast, like, holy shit, their heals are absolutely massive. So it's all about really big heals that happen, you know, with a long cast time, which is kind of like, they can still be really good as long as you don't get trained. You've also got totems which offer a lot of support for your team, and obviously shamans can like help their healers from getting CC'd with grounding totem and stuff like that. So now let's talk about paladin. Let's talk about holy first. Holy paladin is basically all about burst healing. Okay, it's not, you don't have a lot of hots, but I mean, I think you have some, but it's also a lot about instant casting. You're going to be able to heal quite a lot while not casting. Obviously you're going to have to resort to casting at some point, but when you do cast, it's going to be a lot of burst. You also have a decent amount of maneuverability with certain speed increases, which is nice. You have a decent amount of peels because you got good CC, you got good utility to bring to the table. You've got good like low cooldown stuns. You got repentance, which is a very long CC, so you can perform some pretty good CC chains, and you can also do some quite good damage, as damage is really becoming a thing in Legion, which is very interesting. And you're also like a little bit tanky, not just because of bubble, but because you've got plate armor, so you're probably like the tankiest healer out there. But yeah, bubble is very useful. You're going to be, paladins are quite hard to kill. Okay, quite hard for like 2 DPSs to train and try and kill because of divine shield and because of instant heals and because of maneuverability and burst healing. So that's the kind of class that they are. It's a lot like Druid in a lot of ways, but without hots. Not as much hots. Okay, now let's talk about Hunter. Hunter, depending on which spec, you're going to have a lot of sustained damage and a mixture of burst. So it's a lot like Unholy DK in a way. You've got a lot of damage at uptime, and because you can basically do your damage constantly, and you do have frequent, well, not like random moments of burst, but like a mage. The most interesting thing about Hunter is they're probably one of the most maneuverable DPS specs in the game, next to like Feral and stuff. You're going to have no trouble kiting a melee as a Hunter. Like, you've got so many things to basically pin down a melee, and you're not going to have any trouble. And now, because there's no melee restriction, you're going to be able to do damage constantly. You've also got a pet, which provides a little bit of extra utility. You've got, again, very high, because you don't have the best damage in the game, but you make up with it with a lot of high CC, a lot of CC potential. You can probably do one of the best CC chains in the game next to like Boomkin and stuff like that, because you've got like Trap, Stun, Wyvern, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, very high CC, not support class. No, you can't really provide any support, but you can, if you're a very skilled hunter, prevent other hunters from trapping your healer with your pet. Well, that is a very skilled maneuver. And yeah, let's may as well just go on to talk about Priest, even more my voice is about to explode. Shadow Priest, a lot like Warlock in many ways. You've got a lot of rot damage, but you've also got random moments of burst, which is nice. You've got a really good execute, and that's how the damage works. Shadow Priest, again, it isn't the best damage in the game. Actually, recently it has been. Depends how it's going to turn out in Legion. You've got a decent amount of high damage. Your CC isn't the best in the game, I'm going to have to admit, but you make up with that. Well, you've got like an AoE fear, but you have to be melee range to do it, but you can do it with you know, with stealth ability, so you can get pretty good fears off and stuff like that. But really, the thing that makes Priest so good is the support. It is a Priest, Shadow Priest is a support class, right? That's the thing you have to get into your head. It's not just about doing damage, it's about healing your allies, putting bubbles on them, and it's also, what another thing they bring is obviously dispels for your healer. Like, if you heal it, like, your healer's never going to be CC'd when you've got a Shadow Priest in your team. Well, it might be, but like very rarely, because obviously you can't like dispel stuns and stuff. But what else? Obviously you bring Mass Dispel to the table as well, which can remove a lot of very good defensive cooldowns on the enemy team. So very good and fun class to play, because it's a very well-rounded class. It isn't just good at one thing. It's pretty much good at everything. Just as a side note, the reason why Priest, Mage and Healer, I think, well, Priest, Mage and Druid is called God Comp, is because it literally just has everything. You know, you've got everything mixed into all one, and that's why Priest is a fun class to play. Let's jump on to, which one have we missed? Oh yeah, I think Monk. I think, is that literally the last one? That is it. Monk. Honestly, I'm going to have to do some research before I record myself talking about Monk. Actually, I don't. I can remember playing Monk. I'm all good. Monk is a bit like Warrior. You've got a lot of high damage, a lot of burst potential, and it's extremely maneuverable. I've said, what did I say was the most maneuverable class? I said, well, in terms of like a melee class, I think Monk, yeah, I think Monk definitely are the most maneuverable. You just have absolutely no trouble catching up to people with like Cheeto, Pedo and all that kind of stuff. So definitely very fun. You're not going to be pinned down at all. And the same goes for the healer. Healing spec. Healing spec is all about being extremely maneuverable, but when it actually comes to healing, you have to stay still for quite a long time. So it's all about moving a lot and then staying still for quite a while and doing a lot of heals and then moving a lot. But definitely very maneuverable. You've got obviously the bubble, which is really nice. So yeah, probably one of the most fun healers to play. Monk definitely up there with like Druid, because you're very maneuverable. You're not going to get pinned down. You're not going to get frustrated by you know, getting spell locked all the time. So yeah, definitely a fun class to play. And that is pretty much all of it. I've talked for an extremely long amount of time explaining what I think I know about all the classes. Obviously I haven't played them all in explicit detail, but I know what they bring. I just know, you know, I've been against them in Arena. I know what happens in Arena. You know, I've been playing Arena for a very long time. But if you think I'm wrong, I mean, feel free to say, like, and leave in the comment section a little bit more. You know, give everyone else a little bit more insight into the class that you know, that you love, and help people make a decision of what class they want to re-roll in Legion. Because obviously, I'm not an absolute expert on every single class in explicit detail. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Anyway, my name is the Goblin. Until my next video, ciao.